Nirvana Prakarana, The Transcendence, Chapter 2, The Story of Deva Puja. The cloudless deep sky is reflected on the still surface of the lake. There is not even a whisper of breeze, and the lake surface appears like a flawless mirror. As one comes down the shoulder of the mountain, one starts observing the reflected images of the mountains and the vegetations on the other surface of the lake. For a moment, the beholder of these images even loses himself in the images, forgetting the real objects. This happens every day to us. A photograph of a place or a person is more attractive than the place or the person himself. This very phenomenon is used to their advantage by the people advertising and marketing the consumer products. An attractive image or a packing is enough to tempt a consumer into the vicious web of consumerism, which has been rightly said to be the art of selling goods to a consumer who neither needs them nor can he afford. A lie wrapped in sweet words or accompanied with flattery is more acceptable to us than the truth which may be uttered rather harshly. We seldom note hypocrisy accompanied as it is by false smiles and sweet words that are nothing but the virtual images of thoughts have become more important to us. The society in general has become so insensitive as to get carried away by sophistication and etiquette. But it does not in any way mean that this disease is incurable. The above observations prove that man as such lives too much on the periphery without any concern or even memory of the center. Once his attention starts withdrawing from the periphery and moves towards the center, the transformation sets in. All life, starting from the botanical and animal life up to man, is graded from simple to more and more complex form. And up to primates or the apes, the evolution is totally unconscious. The life cannot help but evolve. The scientists, whether they are biologists or anthropologists, agree totally on this point, that the evolution of the human body as such has stopped thousands of years back. This only goes to show that the horizontal evolution, if one may call this growth and mutation of the material body, has stopped for him. The dimension of evolution has shifted from material to the spiritual plane, or from the horizontal to the vertical plane for man. Because of this very reason, there is more freedom, as any spiritual development by its very nature has to be conscious. But then, mind with the help of the senses is outgoing, as its function is to gather outside information. Man has depended on this instrument for his very survival during his days of animalhood. As a result, they have become part of his trusted retinue. And in spite of leaving his cave and his movement towards civilization, science, technology, and other outward growth, man in general has not bothered to entertain any other thought in his mind than mere survival. Consequently, all his technology has only improved upon his already existing senses and brain. For example, TV, telescope, and microscope are the extension of his eye. Computers are extension of his brain, etc. It is almost like an airplane meant for flying is being used on the road. Unhappiness has become a common factor for all of us. Man is the only creature who is always in anguish because He is not using himself for the purpose he is meant to fulfill. He is meant to evolve vertically and not horizontally. The desires and cravings for objects of senses are endless. Thirst for knowledge is also endless. This is where the observation of our rishis is extremely revolutionary. They said that the thirst for objects only increases with each effort to satisfy, that the mystery of the universe only deepens if we continue to search for it outside before trying to seek the experiencer, the knower. Literally, this was a revolution. In evolution, the senses are used to keep the attention outside, while man is meant for this revolution of turning his attention inwards, the origin of thoughts, experience, knowledge, and emotions, in short, towards himself. It is true that unless he fulfills his minimum needs for survival, he may not even be aware of this inner dimension. However, it is not mandatory that man should and must turn his attention within. The change in the direction of attention or the turning point is totally dependent on the individual choice. We can choose to begin this revolution or completely ignore it and continue the animalistic life of struggle for survival. This freedom is peculiar only to mankind, but unfortunately, though man may choose to remain at the level of survival, life will not allow him. For life means movement, and he is compelled to move in the horizontal direction, and that is how he tends to regress into animalhood. In fact, he becomes worse than an animal, which is obvious from the ecological mess he has created for himself in the name of progress. The freedom involves a great responsibility. Man is what he is only because of himself, and no one else is responsible. Jean-Paul Sartre, the French existentialist philosopher, has said that man is condemned to be free because all other animals have a pre-programmed and specific direction of growth. A dog lives and dies as a dog, but a man need not. He can die as an enlightened man or even as a great sinner, worse than animals. The freedom to choose the vertical growth demands a great sense of discipline, which is obvious. For a person piloting an airplane has to comply certain rules and regulations connected with aviation. Perhaps there is an innate hesitation or even fear due to which he tries to continue as nothing more than a social animal. This sarga gives the inner significance of the ritualistic worship of the chosen deity. Sage Vasishta continued by saying that the most of the humankind is conscious only of the body it identifies, the I with body composed of 5 elements, and is governed by change and time. While the truth is that the 5 elements and time are temporary by nature. The sage gave the example of a person sleeping on a bed roams around in all directions in his dream body. This happens even in the wakeful state when one is in the act of daydreaming, while all along the body remains on the same bed. Sankalpa is the axle of the car of existence. Unless axle is stopped totally through viveka and vichara, the chain of birth and death cannot be stopped. He added that unless one becomes conscious of this useless movement, no amount of scriptural study can be of any help to such person. Instead, such a one will use even the Shastras for only the material end, that is, to increase the involvement and indulgence. That is why one must eliminate the lower mind which generates pain and fear. When one is under the influence of the lower mind, even an enlightened person may not be having any effect on such a person. The revered sage then went on to narrate the details of the meetings he had with Parameshwara. Vasishtha said that once he spent a long time on the Kailasa mountain worshipping Parameshwara and performing tapas. On the midnight of the 8th day of the first half of the lunar month of Simha, when it was pitch dark and everything was silent, he came back from the state of Samadhi. He saw an incomparable light never seen before. In that splendor of light, he beheld Parameshwara and Parvati. They were preceded by Nandi, the vehicle of Shiva. Vasishtha, along with his disciples, worshipped them and sought their blessings. The great Lord, in turn, inquired about the Muni's tapas and the progress made thereby. The sage sought an esoteric explanation of Deva Puja, to which Parameshwara replied, Deva or God is neither Vishnu nor Shiva nor any other person having a body of 5 elements, nor is it the mind. It is Jnana, the self, without beginning or end. It is limitless and actionless, fit to be worshipped, and worship happens to be the best aid for the ignorant who are unable to rise to the lofty level. Just as travelers who are unable to walk large distances are told that their destination is only at a calling distance, so as not to let their spirits droop, the persons without jnana are told to worship diverse forms at first. But the wise declare that jnana cannot dawn in such a process. Their contention is that the worship of diverse forms does not help in transcending forms. It is beyond even the Shastras. The God is the great Satta Matra or pure being. Should this jnana subject itself to vikalpas, it abandons its real nature and becomes individualized and separate. The one chit or consciousness contracts through contemplation in regular succession into different states of avidya. Conditioned by space, time and other powers, it becomes an ignorant jiva fulfilling the functions of buddhi, ahankara and manas. The Lord continued, Atma Tattva has all the Shaktis in it which generate bondage and freedom. In Atman, there are Shaktis like Ichha, will, Vyoman, Akasha or space, Kala, time, Maha, might, Jnana, wisdom, Kriya, action, Kartru, agency of action, Akartru, non-agency, etc. The sportive Shaktis of Ajnana generate birth and death. Non-identification of I with the body is the supreme worship. One should always remember that the supreme principle is beyond all sankalpa and hence all action which follows it. It includes everything and yet transcends everything. The external form of worship is only gross. It should be respected. For as long as there is the wisdom of Viveka within, so long shall the mind be in dhyana, even in the form of worship. One should be ever in jnana amidst all the actions, including the perception through senses. That is how the contemplation on the Atma Tattva becomes possible, and all the sense objects become the articles for worship. The great Lord assured Vasishtha that even if the ignorant perform such dhyana and steadily increase the time of being in such state, she or he can merge in the Brahmic light. Ritualistic worship has been performed by millions of Hindus for at least 1,000 years. It is claimed that it was revived and reformed by the great Acharya Shankara during his lifetime. It has a very few important steps. First step is the preparation for worship. In this, after his own bath, the devotee collects the materials like flowers, cleans the place of worship, prepares sandal paste and food offering. Then he lights the lamp in the temple and purifies his mind through what has been called as nyasa, which involves the invocation of various deities in different parts of his body and mind. Nyasa is meant to bring in the conviction of the existence of the divinity within. This is followed by Avahanam, or the invocation of the Ishtadevata, the chosen deity, into the image to be worshipped. This is followed by bath, decoration, offering incense, light and food, stotras or hymns of praise and salutations, and finally leave taking. This practice of Deva Puja, if performed with awareness, helps in purification of mind, preparing it for antarmukhata. In the preparation of worship, like gathering the materials, unwanted thoughts are eliminated from the mind. In the practice of nyasa, centering becomes possible. In avahanam, the single thought condition of mind becomes possible. And in the offering, all the senses are utilized for transformation, as it is not for oneself but for the Ishtadevata. But then, human mind has the expertise of converting anything into a mechanical practice or an empty gesture. We have millions of persons performing the ritualistic worship, sometimes twice or even thrice a day, while lakhs of temples to offer our prayers. But unfortunately, we hardly see any noticeable change in neither their attitude nor way of life. On the contrary, we see such persons nurturing a false pride and a sense of superiority over the others, so-called non-religious persons. Mahadeva continued by saying that he had dealt with the external worship so far and would deal with the internal worship. Instead of taking the help of an external image, one should resort to the internal divine presence which pervades in all the centers, in manas, sankalpa, the prana and apana. The worshipper should continually contemplate on the inner light which gives us the sense of being and lights our mind and intellect, karmendriyas and jnanendriyas, and all the shaktis or potencies. One should learn to become aware of all activity that takes place in the body and mind. With this awareness, one reaches the sanctum sanctorum, or the innermost shine, and comes face to face with the self. Being identified with this self or the center, the worshipper becomes capable of enjoying anything as the non-dual principle. Whatever be the experience, one can never get either indulged or involved in it from this level. Even in the so-called gross Deva Puja, while performing Anganyasa and Karanyasa, or the nyasa of parts of body and hands, the mantras chanted distinctly place different deities in different parts of the body and functions like speech, sight, hearing, touch, even the physical strength, etc. When one chants them with awareness, and bhava or mood, one can make even the ritualistic worship into a deeply esoteric practice. Shiva said that just as the 6 different tastes, sour, pungent, bitter, astringent, sweet, and hot, are perceived only when the potency of taste is joined with manas, the internal significance of worship can be felt only when there is the quiescence of mind. With the quiescence, even the worldly objects become universal. But if it is done without quiescence, the spiritual entities like mind, intellect, and ahankara cannot be felt. One should be free of all desire and thought to reach the center called the self. Like a washerman removing the dirt from dirt, as the alkaline soil was used before the soap was invented, the pure vasanas are impure, they relieve or restrict the impure vasanas. Continuing, the great Lord said that the practices like Deva Puja, the company of an enlightened preceptor, and his advice are all like the dirt removing soil. They help the aspirant to look for and succeed in discovering the reality within. It is difficult to cross over this ocean of samsara without the help of Guru, Shastras, and discipleship. All the three are very important. An enlightened Guru alone can bring in the understanding of the essence of the Shastras, and unless there is the real and earnest discipleship which has the virtues required for sadhana, that is sadhana chatushtaya, he is not at all eligible for the initiation into secrets of spirituality. Those men who ignore the inner call in preference to the involvement and indulgence are sinners. Lord blessed Vasishta that he be continually immersed in such esoteric worship of the jnana and retreated to his abode with his divine consort, attendants, and the Vahana. Sage Vasishta said that ever since he has been performing this jnana puja and has totally gained control over the vasanas and been enjoying the union with Jnanatman, thereon he blessed Rama that he too may attain the lofty state by performing all activity with an unattached mind. Rama expressed his gratefulness and joy in not only learning the esoteric secrets but in eliminating the desires to a great extent. Unless man chooses to move in the direction he is meant to traverse, he is bound to regress in the direction of animalhood. And always the choice is between awareness and instinct, or between consciousness and unconsciousness. And awareness cannot possibly be forced or even caused, because awareness is always voluntary. Though some outer situation or experience may become instrumental in helping one to look in a new direction. But it is not at all necessary that everyone should start changing from the materialistic to a spiritual way of life. Most of the time, when something goes wrong, we think of changing our outer circumstances like the place or relationship instead of making an effort to find out whether there is something wrong with us. For example, when we become angry, we invariably blame the person who caused this anger instead of trying to find the source of anger. That is how we keep changing the milieu instead of transforming ourselves. Deva Puja, as explained in this sarga, is really lofty and practical in the sense that it gives the inner processes that should take place with the outer rituals and gestures. In this awareness is the master key for the entry into the palace of the spirit. This is true not only for the puja but any spiritual practice. In the external puja, even the senses and their objects are purified, as it were, giving an opportunity for the worshipper to transform his outlook. There is a very enlightening episode from the life of a Tamil saint who was a devotee of Vishnu in Yoga Nidra at a place called Srirangam. The king of that place was literally infatuated by the beauty of one of his wives. Once, when the king was walking towards the temple with his retinue, the umbrella carrier did not position the umbrella properly as the harsh rays of the sun fell on his beloved wife's face. Losing his temper, the king took the umbrella in his own hands to protect his wife. The saint, seeing this, approached the king and asked him why he had done it. The king said innocently that his wife, who was the most beautiful of all women, would suffer it if he had not protected her from the sun. The saint told the king that he would show the king someone who is more beautiful and took him into the sanctum sanctorum. Perhaps it was the presence of the saint, or maybe the king too was ready, or it is likely that it was both. The king beheld the Lord in all his beauty, glory, and became an ardent devotee. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that the devotee gets an opportunity to sublimate all his emotions by directing them towards the divine. But there should be total awareness. Without awareness, the practice becomes mechanical, empty, and perhaps even harmful. In our country, what goes on in the name of worship in the public or private temples is an opportunity to ask something from God. In other words, we have taken the worship to be a means for fulfilling our desires. One goes to the temple either to ask for something, or to lodge a complaint, or perhaps to honor the agreement decided by the devotee in case his demand is fulfilled, while the process is meant to free the worshipper from the activity called mind. When one beholds the beauty, one gets enchanted and lost in it. One totally forgets oneself, the beholder, the experiencer. At other times, when one experiences pain, one is obsessed by that which causes it, again forgetting the sufferer. Entrapped in the images, one forgets the real. The gift of spirituality dawns on such a person who tries to seek the source instead of the cause that may be outside, who tries to approach the center instead of the periphery that is this world, who starts the journey to the fountainhead of all energy, all peace, and all joy.